welcome everybody, and welcome Niall Muldoon. Lovely to be speaking with you again. How are you today?
I'm very good today indeed, Jim. Very, very good. Lovely warm day here. Able to work in shorts and t-shirts. You can't complain. It's a bit like Melbourne. It's as close as we'll ever get to it.
It might even be warmer. And funny enough, I was watching back on the webinar that you and I did back in February. And that day was a particularly cold day, and I had my turf fire on. So it's a very different part of the year for us. Niall, when we spoke in February, we covered a lot of ground. And we also had a clamor of people asking if we could get you back again. So really appreciate you taking the time to come back with us today. I was watching it last night, as I said, and a couple of things that really resonated with me listening back was you spoke about a few key topics. And one of the topics was the idea of the child being placed at the heart of the system. And that was kind of your desire, your vision for, I guess, children's welfare and caring for children in Ireland today and in the future, and having a safe place for children in Ireland today and in the future. The other thing you had was you had some really great pieces of advice. One of them that sticks out to me was you spoke about, in response to a question that was asked of you, when people are seeing their children suffering with or battling with anxiety or challenged by trauma, you said, and I thought it was really powerful, to show you care, let the child feel what they're feeling, but also to come back to it again, to have the conversation again in the future when the child feels in a safer place, and that the idea of not avoiding that conversation. I think that was a really powerful takeaway for me, at least. And the other thing I thought was really powerful, Niall, was there was rich data that you shared with us, and surveys and trends and evidence. And behind that, there were also really powerful stories of the individual children behind the data, the charts, the trends, the statistics. And if we're speaking about people who are finding an increase in anxiety or an increase in isolation, an increase in disconnection, you always have a picture in your mind of a parent or of a child who's facing that challenge head on, which I think was very powerful. So hopefully today we're going to get some of those kinds of insights again. So maybe the first thing I'd like to ask, if I can, is we're in July. The last time we spoke was February. How are you doing, and how have you been managing over the last number of months?
Well, I'm glad we're speaking at this stage. Maybe if I chatted to you a month ago, I might have been in trouble. We've had an extremely busy time since Christmas. So many things going on for children. We had so many bits of work coming to fruition. Investigations, annual reports, various different public engagements, and it was really, really tough. I must say, I've worked very much more than I've had probably in the last 5 years. The last 2 years have been tough. 6 days a week, 7 days a week. And again, trying to find the balance for myself has been difficult. But thankfully, the last 3 weeks now, I've got off on 2 weeks holidays. And I also spent an extra week then in Donegal, sharing time with my mother and also doing remote working. So the benefits of remote working was great from that point of view. And I think and again, with the sunshine and stuff like that, it allows you to sort of extend the day and allow yourself more opportunities to recharge. So yeah, I think there's a sense there's a wee bit of calm coming into the office for a couple of weeks through the summer period. Delighted with all the work we've done, but it's tough going. But certainly I'm in a good space at the moment. Really looking forward to what has to be done in the future.
When you mentioned your mother there, you were sharing with me this morning about one of your tea breaks while you were minding your mum.
That's right. Yeah. It was, again, it's one of those things that just happened out of the blue. I decided, again, working from home, we took a break about 11:15. I went into the kitchen. My mother she loves her classical music. She had Strauss's Blue Danube going as high as it could. And we just fell into a waltz, not a very good one. And as my daughter would say, my 87-year-old mother has many good moves than I have. But we did it, and it was just so lovely and enjoyable. And I must say, it was one of those things that you couldn't script write it. It was just beautiful.
Yeah. And there's a bit of a kind of a contrast between that and some of the pressures then that you felt. So maybe just for everyone here, would you mind kind of in the simplest way possible, sort of describe what is the work of the Ombudsman's for Children's Office, and what are the kinds of sort of what's a day in the life like, if there is such a thing?
Yeah, well, overall, the job of the office is to promote and protect the rights of all children in Ireland. We're an independent oversight organisation, human rights organisation, independently set up so that I'm appointed by the president. My job is to ensure that the government do their job in relation to protecting and promoting the rights of children. So we take complaints or investigations in relation to any area in which children are supported by the government, by the state. So that could be anything from the time they go into preschool through to turning 18 years of age, the leaving cert, through the education system, hospitals, housing, justice, a whole range of areas like that where the children interact with the state. And it's our job to challenge them. So, examples recently would have been, we spoke about it before, was sort of looking at meeting children from their homeless situations, children with mental health issues, children from travellers' background, children direct provision. So it's sort of bringing those issues and concerns that those children have to the highest level. A typical day, if there was such a thing, it could be anything from, on the day of the annual report, I did my first radio interview sort of 6:15 in the morning, through to a webinar at 7 o'clock between 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock that night on something like education or the future of education. The following day, I would have followed it up with a conversation about the future of domestic violence, perhaps, or children within domestic violence. So the whole range of things, and that's what makes this job so wonderful. It's the breadth of it, it's the interesting elements to it, but it's also what makes it so challenging is the breadth of it and the different elements that are involved in it. So from my point of view, I have 6 years left. You're allowed 6-year term. I was happily and delighted to be reselected for a second term, which is the maximum I can do from February. So I'm working my way towards the next 6 years. And just the day-to-day working, we've grown our team in the last while. I think we've taken on board probably by the end of this year, we'll have 10 new staff in through the COVID period, which means that I have to learn how to manage in a different way as well. So just all these things are part and parcel of the job, and part and parcel of trying to make sure we do the best for the children that we serve. And it's always evolving.
And Niall, in terms of you and your team, like as you said, there's a really broad range of things you can be dealing with on any day or any time of the day. Is it a generalist role, or is it a specialist role, or is it both? And how do you manage that?
I would say it's a generalist role. The team that I have would be broad in experience. We'd have people who've worked as social workers, people who've worked as teachers, lawyers, human rights activists, all sorts of different backgrounds, teachers. And I think what we do is we try to ensure that everybody gets to learn about as many things as possible. But by the nature of these things, if you do 2 or 3 cases in relation to direct provision, you'll know more than somebody else will. But I suppose from my job as Ombudsman, I have to be the generalist who then gets up to speed as quickly as possible as a specialist. So if we do a report or on an investigation on the traveller site, I need to know everything about that investigation by the time I go to public, so that I can discuss it in as broad a sense as possible. And that's part of the team's jobs to help me to get up to speed on it, but also my job to keep in touch with it as it goes along, as it develops, so it isn't as big a jump for me. So yeah, I think most of us are generous. We deliberately haven't gone down the route of saying your job is this area and your job is that area, because I think it allows our people to develop better and gives them more sense of fulfillment and understanding of all the work. Whereas if you focus in a certain area, similarly, if you lose that person, you've lost a lot of experience as well. So we keep it to the generalists and go from there.
And a lot of the people, as you said, will have already got deep experience in particular areas, but then in their role within the office, they're applying that across a broad range of skill sets.
That's right. Yeah.
And in terms of, you mentioned there sort of the direct provision, travelers' rights, particularly the rights of children in the traveling community. What are the kind of the major areas of disadvantage or vulnerability that you see we as a nation, we as a state, have today in relation to our children?
I suppose in the broadest sense, I think it's still that, for one of I'm trying to make the right term, but it's that congregated settings. Again, we go back 100 years, Ireland put children into lots of congregated settings, whether it was in mother and baby homes, industrial schools, children with epilepsy were put behind walls. All sorts of areas we used to gather our children together who were a little bit different. We're still doing that, I think, in relation to travelers. We're not facilitating them in the way we should be facilitating them to live a healthy life. Direct provision is another one where we congregate the settings. And also within homelessness, we now have situations where we've got homeless hubs and situations where families are living together as a group of others. And again, as a society, when you create others, you allow the general society who don't pay too much attention to that to assume that there's something wrong with them. They're different to me or you. And that's where the problems are. And that's where societies lose out, is because you lose the richness and the quality and the value that come from those children and those families who are in the other section. And we need to start breaking down those walls as much as possible across those areas, homelessness, traveler and direct provision situations, because it's so wrong for the children, but it's also so wrong for the society that wants to grow and that keeps telling the world that they value everybody, that they welcome everybody, that they're an open, warm society. But yet we create these small ghettos of other children, which could be up to as many as 10, 15,000 children across the country in that sort of circumstance. The final piece in that sort of fits into that a little bit more, not quite as neatly, but is the concept of the children that are in economic difficulty or economically vulnerable. We haven't paid enough attention to them either. And I think that all those areas that I talked about have really shone out during the COVID experience, because they didn't have their own wherewithal to protect themselves. So we found that there was rapid spreading of COVID through direct provision centres, rapid spreading of COVID through halting sites. Not so much in the homeless settings, but there were hotels and hostels where there was rapid spreading of COVID, because they couldn't provide safe, secure, standalone isolation spaces for their own children.
Fantastic. So just at this point, if I can, there's such richness in that. So if I heard it right, you said congregated settings.
Mm-hmm.
Spoke about others, which could be the same or could be different. And then you have economically vulnerable. There's three groups of people that today in Irish society in relation to children are the most vulnerable. I love that frames it. So today on our talk, I would like to encourage all of our attendees to send me through any questions you want. Aisling is keeping a very close eye on the chat as it's coming through. So if there's anything that needs to be brought to my attention, Aisling will do that. Thank you, Aisling. And we also have Geraldine and Kerry on the call today who are looking after our social media. And I'd love to see Geraldine and Kerry, if there was a tweet or something we could post on that idea there of the vulnerable falling into those three groups. I think that's a really rich framework for me, at least, to understand kind of where your focus is. And for everybody else, maybe Aisling, if you could just pop in our social media accounts and hashtags and all the rest, that would be great. So Niall, within your sort of day-to-day, if there's a real understanding that that's where vulnerable children sit, stand, reside, live, is there also a lot of your work in the sort of the silent side of society where they wouldn't necessarily neatly fall into these groups, and yet there is other vulnerabilities? And if so, how do you begin to wrap your arms around that? Like, how do you get up on a Monday morning and go, right, okay, how do I look after all of the hundreds of thousands potentially who don't fall into these categories and also might have a vulnerability that's not as visible as the other ones you mentioned?
Yeah. Well, I suppose, I mean, we deliberately set out with when I came into the office first back in 2015, I spent the first year sort of learning about the job and just paying attention. And then we set up a strategic plan from there. And within that strategic plan, we named 3 cohorts of children that we felt we would spend specific time on that wouldn't negate us working on other areas. But we focus on children who were homeless, children who were with mental health difficulties, and children with disabilities. After 3 years, we had a new strategic plan coming in, and we felt we had to look around at other areas as well. But we felt there were still so many areas to be worked on from those 3 that we kept them, and we added in children with children direct provision and children from the traveller Roma communities. So we give ourselves, what that does essentially gives us permission to spend time and resources on those areas. But we at no time will ever ignore issues that come in from other areas. Like we get huge amount of work and huge amount of concern from children with disabilities. And again, COVID, I think we talked about this the last time, COVID really left a lot of those children and those families very, very badly exposed, because, and I think most of society didn't recognize the value that schools had for children with disabilities. They have it for all children, but for children with disabilities particularly, they see it as a routine. They see it as where they are safe. It's where they meet peers that will interact with them, not just friends who are maybe volunteers, or it's people who they really interact with. They got adults other than their parents who really want to help them improve and engage. So they get educated there, but they also learn to socialize. They learn how to share, how to maybe keep the volume down. They learn how to deal with social anxiety. And they've all those sorts of routines that are hugely important within the education system for them. And they lost all of those, but at the same time, they also lost their respite services and other places they might go to, like maybe they might go to a youth group or something that was lost as well. So those children went through an enormous amount through COVID. But similarly, we will find children who are in the education system who have other issues, children who just find it difficult to get to school, that are dropping out. We know there was a large number of children who never went back to school after COVID. You know, they were the sort of lower level, were hemming and hawing about whether they would go back. If they'd done their junior cert, they may have gone back, but the junior cert was cancelled. So they said, why would I go back in 4th year or 5th year, whatever they were going to do? So there's a range of people in that sort of situation. But we constantly get groups of children coming to us, and families and parents coming to us that highlight issues that we'd never thought of. And we continuously try to engage with them and do what we can with it. And it might be just as simple as writing a letter saying we've found out an issue here. We write to the relevant minister and say, what have you done on this issue? And that could be sufficient to move things along.
And do you think, Niall, that there has been kind of a shift because of COVID, particularly from the relative ease of identifying vulnerable groups to now everybody has got a greater degree of vulnerability than ever before?
I think so, but I also think there's a lot of people that are going to recognize their own strengths subsequent to COVID. I think there's people who say, okay, you know what, I thought it was tough for us, but we're okay. We've come through this well. We're in better shape. The family are strong. We both kept our jobs. The school's working okay for us. And we might even, we come through this okay out of it, and we look back with, success. So I think that a lot of people will do that, and they'll acknowledge that. And a lot of society came together in so many great ways. But I do think, yes, what it has done is it's shone a really strong light on where the vulnerabilities were. I think the last time I described it to you as, there was cracks in society all along, but this has really put a fluorescent spray on each crack. We now know where they are very clearly. When we often talked about digital divide before, there was a very subconscious understanding that was city versus urban, or city versus rural. But we know there's lots of children in Dublin City who couldn't afford Wi-Fi and couldn't get broadband and couldn't afford the computers that go with it. So the digital divide was clearly shown as to where it was. So yeah, I do think, and it was Mike Ryan from the WHO who said that the pandemic has clearly highlighted where the inequalities in society already were there, and we just need to start looking about fixing them and be honest about them.
Thank you, Niall. So today we have people from all over the globe, predominantly Ireland. And some of the messaging that we spoke about, the last that you spoke to in February, it resonated with people in Australia as much as it did with people in Ireland or Canada or US or wherever else. Can you speak a little bit, Niall, to the urban-rural divide? Have you spotted anything there? Like, even in your language, you speak about community, you speak about congregated settings, others. Is that different in a rural context compared with an urban context?
I think it's clear. I mean, obviously your community, if you live in a small village of 500 people, your community coming together is much more clear and much easier to see. But I live here in Dublin, and in the community I'm in here in South County Dublin, I think 3 GAA clubs came together to provide volunteers to do the shopping, to collect medication, to help out with old people, whatever it might have been. And that's community in itself. So I think the real positives shone through no matter where you were in the country. But I think as we move forward out of this pandemic, we have to recognize that there's a lot of disadvantages in the rural society, that things like travel is much more of a necessity than it is, because we don't have an integrated bus system or rail system across the country. So people are driving more. They usually tend to be driving older cars, so they're penalised for tax, they're penalised for diesel, they're penalised for parking spaces, those sorts of things. And I think that's just part and parcel of what we have to start to recognise, that if we're going to equalise our society and allow people to have equal opportunities, that those things need to be considered as well. And I think that's only fair into the future.
You mentioned earlier about people, who didn't get to do their junior cert, which is the Irish state exam when you're around 15, 16 years old. You've spoken before, Niall, as well. I've heard you on radio, and I've read your interviews, and we touched on it again ourselves this morning. The idea of transitions. So when children are transitioning from, whether it be primary school into secondary school or high school, or to go from high school into university, college, or the workplace, or go from university, college into the workplace, these transitions, what do you think has, what's the state of play as we look at this today? In February, the question I was asking you was, do you think it's safe for people to go back to school? I think we're still asking similar questions about going back in September, but generally in terms of transitions, what's your thinking on that currently?
Well, I think you're right. I think we still have to be careful and cautious. And I'm hoping that the Minister for Education has plans for return to school, if in case there is any sort of an increase in the variant, the Delta variant, causing trouble. But I think in general, in a non-COVID world, transitions are tough for children. If you're moving from 6th class to first year, it's difficult because you were the top of the tree. You were the main man in the school class. You were the top of the tree. And then you're moving into a place where there might be, instead of having one class that you were used to with one teacher, you now have 12 teachers, 12 different classrooms, maybe 1,000 people milling around you. You need time to adjust to that, and you need help to adjust to that. In the COVID world, you're now looking at a situation where we're not sure what we're going to tell you it's going to be like. You could be meeting your friends online like this, in a face-to-face through a computer, or you might be going in maybe on a Monday and Tuesday and you'd be coming back out. So we can't give you the certainty of what our experience was. And that's difficult for a child who's uncertain or anxious. Some children will be confident, it won't bother them the slightest. But those who need that reassurance and assistance, we can't be sure what we have to say to them. Similarly, if you're moving from, you've just finished your Leaving Cert and you're really been excited for your whole life, you wanted to be a physiotherapist or whatever it is, you're going to the university, we can't tell you, yes, you're definitely going to go in there and you're going to have freshers week and you're going to have parties and balls and you're going to have loads of fun and you get plenty of friends and you're going to meet friends from all over the country. We can't say that. So again, that person is anxious about what it's going to look like. Will I have to go and get a rent somewhere new? Will I get to meet friends? Will I be sharing a house with somebody? Or will I be back down in my own bedroom that I was in for my Leaving Cert while I do first year? These are just uncertainties, and the uncertainty is what leads to anxiety, as you know, Jim. It's that sort of anxiety is caused by that. I'm not sure what I can handle. And if I don't know what I have to handle, then I'm very unsure. So it's given that opportunity to children and young people. And I think what's also happened in the last 18 months to 2 years is that children have gone, we will now have children going in from who started first year when COVID hit, and they're going into third year, but the level of maturity and experience they've had is not equivalent to what a third year would have been before that. Similarly, as you say, they're coming out of university and going into work. We as employers will have to remember the last 2 years has not been the same experience and not given the same level of maturity opportunities to young people as well. So we'll have to cater for that and allow for young people in their first job to perhaps not have the same experience and understanding of what's required, because they would have been doing things online. Their internships would have been done online. Their Erasmus would have been done online. They may not have had the opportunity to dress up and go to work and be there at 9 o'clock at night and stay for overtime and go for drinks and learn how to work in it with a hangover the next morning. All those things that we enjoy and we had to go through haven't happened for them. They may not have been working even. Again, they might not have had the experience of going on a J1 to America or even just going to work in the local restaurant through the summer. So those transitions that we expect and we think we know what they should look like are all changed. And we all have to make sure we support those people who are doing transitioning as best we can and recognize what they're going through.
I often think, Niall, when I listen to you, that I'd love to have that skill of, those people who do those word diagrams and they take all the words and they draw some pictures. Because like, even as I'm just writing it down here, uncertainty leading to anxiety. And I love it, the transitions have changed.
Yeah.
What a world to live in when even the transitions themselves have changed. If there was, we've got a couple of questions coming through that I'm going to maybe put you in a second. And Aisling, thank you so much. Aisling is popping them through to me and they'll come through in direct message to her. But if there was a radio ad that you had unlimited budget, or a TV ad that you had unlimited budget to produce, the only condition was you had to produce it in the next 60 seconds. And it was to deal with this topic of uncertainty. And it was targeted at parents. And it was a message of hope for parents. What would that message be? Like, what would your advice be to parents who are themselves struggling? For example, all the examples you gave, and for example, parents of children who are going to university, but the children are actually in a new city or town at university, but not at university, staying in digs or shared house or whatever, but not having all of those normal interactions. What would your radio ad or TV ad be?
Jim, you know how to put a guy on the spot. I suppose what comes to my mind is something about hope. I think the parents have to be the purveyors of hope to the children and say, listen, I trust you and I believe in you that you can handle this. I'm here to help you handle this. We can't tell you it'll get better, but we are here to tell you we'll help you get through it. And between us, we'll work it out, and hopefully it'll be worth it in the end. And I think that's the essence of parenting, because we can never tell you it's going to be all right all the time, but we can tell you that I'll be here to help you as much as we can when we can get through it.
Oh my God, that's brilliant. It's amazing what you can get when you put the Ombudsman for Children under pressure. That is fantastic. So just to play it back if I can. So you're saying, you are the purveyors of hope as adults, as parents for children, that will help you get through it. We'll get through it together. We can't tell you it'll be okay, or it'll be okay tomorrow, or it'll be okay the next day, but it'll eventually be okay. And we're here to go through this together. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. I suppose that does, for parents listening here, give a certain degree of consolation, but also the parents themselves are struggling sometimes to dig deep for that hope themselves, because it's like everything else. It's not just the kids, the children. It's, me, my job, my spouse's job, us as a society, us as a larger family, our parents, our extended family, the kids that are home, the kids that are already left, the parents that we haven't seen, et cetera, et cetera. But I love that. Can I ask you, Niall, a couple of questions from the audience? So one is, you mentioned a spotlight on social inequality and needing to address that. And the question is, do you have any practical tips that you could offer that we can do to be the change we want to see. So what can we do as members of this society to put that that spotlight, that focus on social inequality, and what we need to do to address that?
A great question, and one that sort of I wish more people would think about. What can you do? I mean, I think it's local. I think we start local and say, right, where can I help locally? And like that thing, I think people put their hands up enormously around Ireland, you know, to volunteer when they were asked to in the times of the lockdown for other people. Social injustice, I think one of the things I would love to see happening more often is people challenging what they know to be myths and to be mistruths. You know, I think the American experience showed that many people can be won over just by the repetition of a lie, which assumes, you know, once you've heard it 4 or 5 times, you assume it must be the truth. But we need to stand up and challenge those sort of mistruths. And you see, again, you talk about the vulnerable groups, the others. That's where a lot of the mistruths are put out there, and they are the ones who are voiceless, so they can't stand up for themselves. So I think if you know the question that direct provision are coming here and taking our jobs and taking our homes, you know, that's patently untrue and never was accurate. But we need to say that loudly and proudly and in front of people who challenge us. Similarly, you know, travelers, there's all sorts of misconceptions about travelers that we need to challenge as well, and homelessness as well. The idea that homelessness is generally due to yourself, and you know, you've been an alcoholic, an addict, something has gone wrong, it's your fault. That's not the case either. Society has created a monster which forces parents who are doing decent jobs to not to be able to afford rent. It allows landlords to put up rents at phenomenal rates. That's about to change now, thankfully. But it allowed sort of unregulated situations in which parents who are both working well could end up in a homeless situation. So that's where simple social equality needs to be challenged, or inequality needs to be challenged, is at the local place. If you're on a dinner table with somebody and they're spouting these myth truths, challenge them. It's difficult and it's uncomfortable, but I'd rather you do it over a dinner table than a poor child has to face the consequences the next morning. You know, so those things that you know, that's a small thing. But then on the bigger level, you can join very many charities. Even simple things like direct provision have the runners. I'm trying to remember there's a charity that runs park runs for children, or for people who run in aid of direct provision, and that sort of shows a solidarity. You know, and again, it might be something you're doing for fun for yourself, but it nominates and it's clearly saying, I'm in support of this group of people. So I think look around locally to see what you can join if you need to, but even on a day-to-day basis, challenge them with truths where you can.
Okay, so really great question you said, and I love that answer. So again, what I'm hearing is think locally and also challenge what you perceive to be mistruths. And you did say as well, Niall, about, you know, in America where a lie was repeated. I think there was lies on all sides repeated, and you know, and even, you know, I think the narrative around unscrupulous landlords is true, and there's also a very clear story about landlords who are very, very fair and are doing the right thing. And there's unscrupulous tenants, and there's great tenants, and it's about really, I guess, having that conversation, isn't it, and challenging things, and then listening to what's been said back. Another question that's come in is, uh, given children are seemingly more anxious due to COVID, what's the impact on neurodiverse children who might be already more prone to these concerns? So again, I guess by neurodiverse children, that again is a fairly wide definition. It could be everything from you know, children with autism, OCD, whatever those challenges are that would make them prone to worry or prone to be overly concerned.
I suppose my concern about it, I think neurodiverse children, again, it's probably the best example of where the supports that were built into our school system were all lost. Many children were getting help maybe with speech and language, they might have been help with occupational therapy or psychology, and they would have been accessing through the school or through the HSE system within the school. and they lost all those. So there's an element of regression happening for many of those children. So again, I think they will be further back on the development than we would have hoped them to be if this hadn't happened 18 months ago. And I think anxiety will build up. I think many of the children, and I've heard many parents talking about it, have regressed to more challenging behaviors. And again, we haven't fully opened up, so the support to help the parents with those challenging behaviors hasn't come into place yet. Some of the schools that they return to were not able to cope with those challenging behaviors, so there has been difficulties there. So I think we have a lot of work to do with those children who are neurodiverse. But I think because I think we left a lot of the burden on the parents throughout the last 18 months and the families, the wider families, and even the wider families. Parents may not have been able to access their brothers and sisters, the aunts and uncles, the grandmothers and mothers to give them respite. So everybody was very tired dealing with those issues, and that didn't provide the best for that child. So yeah, I think we have a lot of catch up to do in that regard.
So conscious of time, because it's flying by, and I'm always interested that there's more attendees now than there were at the start of the top of the hour. So that's always a good sign. And maybe our social media is doing the trick as well. Question for you, Niall. We've talked a bit here, and you've been very careful, I guess, to steer me back into the hope, back into the opportunities, etc., for growth, as opposed to just the opportunities to come out of this less well. What do you think, looking forward, are the key opportunities for growth as you look at children's welfare in Ireland?
I suppose as I was preparing for this, I went back to our annual report, which we published a couple of weeks ago. But in that, I used a quote from C.S. Lewis, and he says, "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending." And I think that's what we need to do. We need to change our ending from here. And from our point of view, we're starting to work on an initiative that we hope will start to impact children's lives into the future around that inequality. We talk about the economic vulnerability, the homeless. We're going to, we're starting to engage with political parties to say we need to challenge ourselves to perhaps end homelessness. Not just combat it, not just work on it, not just talk about 10,000 units. Remember, there's 8,000 people in homelessness at the moment. Let's eradicate that. Let's eliminate that. Use these words, these strong, powerful, ambitious words, and set ourselves a target of doing that within, 5 years, whatever it might be, but come together so that all the political parties around the table agree, so that no matter who's in government, this is a challenge that we're going to take on for our children. Similarly, we found ourselves with the PUP payment, what's it, payment for pandemic? I can't remember what it stands for, but again, on an international basis, it's essentially the basic payment that government have given to our people who are out of jobs. And that in itself has set a standard and said, well, this is what we need. We need to find a way in which all families have a basic floor which they will not fall below. That means that every child in that family has food, has warm clothing, and has a safe place to live and can attend education. If we can create that in the future, find a mechanism that allows us to create that minimum equal standard for everybody, a standard of living, then we will prevent poverty for children, which in turn frees up money and payments. Instead of paying 50 million a year on family hubs for homeless, we're now paying 50 million towards better education. We're paying 50 million towards special disability. Similarly, it will change the social protection ways. It'll change the way, more importantly, it'll change the way those children interact with their societies. They will now go to school with full bellies. They will be able to concentrate and focus. They will have uniforms. They will have their books. They will feel able to compete with the best. They will then in turn have more optimism. They will have less health issues. They will have better employment opportunities. So again, with a relatively small investment now at this stage in those sort of areas over the next 5 to 10 years, we could change society completely in the future and really show Ireland as a place of welcome for all of our children, and that they can have a safe, secure place to live and a safe, secure quality of living. That's the sort of thing we're looking forward to in the future. And I think it's something, as I look around at the moment, all the talk is about what we're going to do about the economy. It's about this industry, that industry, and another industry being helped. Nobody's shouting about the children and what they need for helping. And I think this way we can try and provide an opportunity for those children into the future.
It's incredible to listen to you say that, Niall, because you speak about it in a very coherent way, and as simple as it is, it's not naive, right? I mean, and I think that's maybe one of the things that COVID has taught us, is that change can happen at a scale that we would never have thought possible previously. And, you know, even as you outlined those kind of minimum winning games, you know, those basic rights that we'd expect that in 2021 in Ireland, 100 years after the formation of our state, that we'd be much further advanced on. You know, eradicate homelessness, like direct provision is I think going to be something that we look back on with deep embarrassment into the future. You know, you and I were talking earlier. I'm 51. I know you must be in your late 30s, and when we were growing up in Ireland, it was an Ireland of you know, very much judgment, you know, very much maybe the less positive things of the church ethos coming, you know, around in terms of shame and guilt. And also think, you know, there was an even broader cadre of others, and anybody who was anywhere different was you know, pushed to the outside. And we have made such a change there, yet still today, you know, we're so far away. So you've done a lot of work recently on travelers' rights, and Ashley put out a link to the report that you did, and that report was called "No End in Sight," SITE. What were the key things, I guess, Niall? Maybe first of all, that surprised you, and also, what were the things that maybe gave you most hope as you did that work and did that research and produced that report?
What surprised me, I suppose, the difficulties that these children were surviving and you know, trying to live their lives, and their parents. So again, it was a case in which there was a halting site that was built for 10 families, and they had over 40 families there when we were there. They were living in a situation in which they had to go outside to what was called welfare units, you know, and again, even that euphemism, essentially it was outside toilets, you know, that we eradicated from Ireland in the 1950s. They were living in that. Those units were poorly maintained. There was cracks, there was coal, there was cement blocks, it was steel toilets. There was water running down the caravans. There was rats. You know, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But yet these families were really close knit and really worked together, and they really wanted their children to have a better life. So that was where it started from. They came to us to complain about that, and then we went to look at, you know, the simple housing, social housing applications that were put in for 11 families out of those 40. And we spent 3 years on the investigation, and it took us maybe 2.5 years to find the paperwork, or to be given the paperwork that was involved. And even within that, it wasn't clear what was done at each step for those people. So across almost 13 years, there was only, I think it was 9 housing applications or housing offers given, and 2 of them were picked up. But yet the continuous narrative that goes out is that these families are saying no to houses left, right, and centre, and that's not true. We didn't have the paperwork to show that, and even the paperwork we had from the council was intermittent and poor, and wasn't, you know, you're supposed to apply every year. We had paperwork from the families that showed that they applied every year, but it wasn't necessarily on the records for the council. So again, the format and the way they were dealt with was really, really poor. What was positive was that after 2 years, and we were sort of coming close to finalizing things, we engaged with the council and the local authority, and they really took on board. They argued their point. They made their case. We came back with our counter arguments, and between us, we came up with a set of recommendations and findings that they were willing to accept and to promote, which is hugely important to me, because there's no point in me writing recommendations that they're not going to take on board. So they agreed, and the first recommendation was that the CEO takes personal responsibility to make sure these recommendations are done. So that was agreed, and that really, again, put a huge priority in that regard, and it moved things forward. When we produced the report, I was delighted that within a day or 2 days, it was being debated within the House of the Oireachtas in the Parliament, and we had agreement from the Minister, or the Taoiseach, Prime Minister, saying that this should not be allowed to go on anymore. So again, I hope it's a starting point for a new way of doing things with children and families within traveller holding sites, because I think as part of the othering, I think we've all, as a society, allowed ourselves to think this is only about the adults. And they say these adults are bad in this section or that section, and we're good in our section. So that's all there is to it. But in fact, these children, bright, intelligent, fun-loving children, are being hugely hampered, feeling shame, feeling stigma, feeling embarrassed because going to school because they have to walk through puddles, because the council won't put in a proper footpath, because the locals don't want a footpath connecting the halting site with themselves. And these are societal issues, and everybody has their point of view, but they just need to be discussed and brought out, as opposed to polemic points of view being taken and people just sticking to one side or the other. Again, I always give the example that I was born and bred on the Donegal border. If Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness can come together and make things work, there is no reason why we can't get societies to allow travellers and other groups to integrate and to work where they need to, and to have what they need. We can provide it. The money is there within the Traveller Society or Traveller. There's accommodation funding that's put back. Maybe 50% is sent back every year, which is an absolute disgrace. So again, what I've written to every political leader is that it's time for them to step up and tell their local councillors they need to engage in this process, so that you're not sending back funds anymore that were put aside specifically for traveller accommodation. You've got to commit to making this work. And that's going to take time and energy, but it has to be done with an open heart. And it's time has come. We cannot allow those children to suffer anymore.
I'm particularly interested in the work, thank you for that, Niall. I'm particularly interested in the work you've done with that report, and also with the actions coming out of it. Where did you learn to do this? Like, who taught you to manage the political machinations of dealing with the politicians themselves, the CEOs of the councils, the various representative groups, the local community groups, and you're there with a team of how many thousand do you have working with you again?
All together, yeah.
People, right? Where did you learn those skills? Like, where did they come from?
Can you ask me an easier question? I don't know, Jim. I mean, what have we got? I think the essence of our team, and we have a fantastic team working with. The essence of my team is about keeping the child at the center. So every discussion you make and every question you ask is say, listen, this is in relation to Mary or Jane or Kate or Michael, and this is why we're asking it. Secondly, you treat every answer and every public official or anyone you talk to with the utmost respect. Their answer is genuine and real, and they're coming from a true place. And then when you bring that, you find a way to find a middle ground without compromising. Some people will challenge us. We've been challenged with the High Court. We've been challenged with different things, and that's allowed. That's part of what has to happen. So we have to be strong in our opinions, and we need to bring those opinions to people with respect and say, listen, I've read everything you've given us. I've seen all the evidence. However, I still believe this is my position. And I think that people tend to respect that. They tend to recognize that you're not trying to ambush them. You're having an open, frank discussion. And at the end of that open, frank discussion, there still may be disagreements. But we've all done our best to bring it in some direction. Ultimately, I have to make a decision as to whether I think you've failed in your duties or not. And we make those decisions. But even within that, we'd say, right, and here's the recommendations we're making after that. Do you think you can work with those? So at every step, we're trying to make sure that this is about the children. And I think, particularly when the traveller scenario, I think a lot of people have forgotten about the children. They got so caught up in the energy and the fighting and the arguments, and that people are bad guys and good guys. And I reminded people of the Carrick Mines fire, and from anybody who's international, 2015, 10 people died in one caravan site because they were so closely packed that one electrical spark caused so many people to die. I think 4 or 5 from one family. And yet we still have a situation when that could happen here in this site that we're talking about in 2021, 6 years later. And people have forgotten that this was about protecting lives and children's lives. And we remind them about it being about the children, and which in turn becomes about the next generation, then, when we've set up with family, travelers are already losing they have, I think there's something like 16 years shorter lifespan than anybody else in the population. And you can see why. If you're born into a place where you already have respiratory difficulty by the time you're 1, most travelers are afraid their children will die before they're 2. So where have I learned it? I've learned just to be respectful of people, to be strong in your opinions, to take on board what they say and try and deal with it in a way that allows them to feel heard, and then move forward from there.
It sounds really simple when you say that, and I get the idea of keeping the child at the heart of the conversation, at the center of the conversation, and having the utmost respect for the officials. It's still though hard because it's probably the last bastion of stigma and racism and bigotry that we tolerate in Ireland, particularly against the traveller community. So you I guess you're not winning any popularity competitions by taking on some of these causes, nor is your team. So it's just incredible work that you're doing. Now,
but just on that, Jim, just maybe I think one of the things that really surprised me from that was that how much people latched onto it. I think there's so many good people out there that didn't get an opportunity to hear this sort of information, this sort of evidence, and they latched onto it to say, right, okay, we're going to do better. We had contacts from a few local authorities to say, we want to do better because of this. And I think we're giving people an opportunity to do better by acknowledging where the flaws were. So hopefully that will be the case.
Yeah, that and I suppose it is trying to find a way where everybody sees that this is maybe the hard thing to do, but also it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And again, in your arguments, Niall, throughout, you're saying that's 50 million, yes, or whatever the figure is, in X that can be invested into Y, and wouldn't that investment be a lot better for society in general, rather than to staying where we are, because where we are is not a good place to go to. Niall, you've been very generous with your time as always. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would have liked me to ask you? There's a whole bunch of questions that's still here, but was there anything in particular that was burning that you wanted to cover?
No, I think you've covered a lot of stuff there, and a few areas that I hadn't expected. So kudos to you in that regard. No, I'm very happy with what we've conversed about so far. Unless there's any questions coming in from the public that you want to link with, I'm happy with how we've conversed so far.
Thank you. Well, what I'm going to do, if it's okay, is I'm going to ask Caroline Clark to come in. So Caroline will join us in a second. And Caroline knows a lot of the people who are on the call here today. So that would be appreciated if Caroline could do a little summary. I suppose from my side, I loved the idea of you speaking about the vulnerable groups, including those in a congregated setting, the others, and the economically deprived. I love the idea about uncertainty, building anxiety, and that even the transitions have changed. I really found that very powerful. And the radio ad, TV ad that you're going to produce and we're going to put out on the airwaves, I thought was brilliant. Starting with, you are the purveyor of hope for your children, and that you're speaking to your children in accepting tones and saying, we will get through this together, not making any false promises, but we're in it together, and that we will get through it together. And then finally, the insight into how you handle dealing with difficult situations where you're keeping the child at the center of the conversation while also having the utmost respect for those officials that you're dealing with. And I think, although you didn't say it, intense bravery and courage to do what you're doing. So Niall, thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Caroline, and just to say, I really appreciate it. We've had some lovely comments coming in as well from people who have just really appreciated your honesty as always. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Hi, everybody, and thank you all for joining and your engagement as always. I know when we ran this back in February, it was hugely popular, really strong engagement and comments. And what I thought I'd do is, I know, Jim, you've covered a couple of points from today, but just remind us of some of the lovely rich content that came from February as well. I think one of the things that always stands out to me around with Niall is that there's so much data out there, and we can't argue with data, but what Niall does is that he uses the data to tell stories, and he always knows the people behind the stories, you know, the Mary, the Janes and the Michaels, and that he comes from a deep place of respect and compassion and empathy. So you're a very special person. I think the other couple of points I brought forward from February are that children only ask for what is fair. And, you know, as a parent, I've now seen that, you know, when Niall said that, and we can give them no less. And I think that's something that we can bring forward when we're talking to our children and our friends' children. The other point I wanted to talk about quickly is that if a child is dealing with anxiety, just show you care, give them a hug, let them know that you're supported, you know, remember the radio ad. And also when they're feeling a little bit better, go back to them and check in again, because thoughts can linger, children can bring these forward. So it's just you're reinforcing that support that they may potentially need. And then challenge misconceptions. I absolutely love that, Niall. And I think sometimes, you know, at dinner parties, we can be a little bit afraid to speak out. But bringing back to your further point about always do it respectively. Always, you know, see the other perspective, respect the other point of view, but be brave in your challenges as well. And then last but not least, absolutely love your passion to put the child at the heart of the system. And I know Jim and myself have always been very passionate at bringing I'm Here to schools, and we're delighted to be able to say that we're piloting I'm Here in primary schools in September, and we really hope that the I'm Here squad for schools will play a role in your vision, and you might even help us with a few schools. And if anybody is out there, particularly underprivileged schools who've really been impacted in the last year, that we can go in and support not just the children, but teachers, staff, parents and guardians. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much, and enjoy the sunshine, everybody. We're all kids at heart, so get out there with your buckets and spades.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.